Hey everybody, it's Peter and this is my riding impressions review of the 2025 Yamaha MT-07, a bike that a whole lot of people love. And if I'm thinking about it and you want it summed up in one kind of statement, it's kind of flawless when you consider the intent of Yamaha with this bike, and the intent being make an affordable bike that is a mainstream compatible bike that most people can ride, most people can afford, that does everything probably a little better than the average and doesn't do anything really worse than the average. That's what this bike is. It's a whole lot of fun, and I just finished a riding impressions or riding drive it, so you're gonna see some B-roll of that throughout this video, and we're gonna talk about what it's like to ride the MT-07. Before we go too far, I want to thank McLean Sports for giving me complete access to their entire product line and giving me a whole bunch of bikes that I can ride. Most of the riding reviews I do are through that shop, so do me a favor, give them a like, give them a, give the video positive comments, and if you want to help my channel grow and get me more access to more riding, do me a favor, just find a couple videos you like on the channel, watch them to the end. That really helps out. The bigger this channel gets, the easier it is for me to say, hey, I've got an audience that wants to see my review of that bike, and that's how this works. All right, let's get going with this review. So let's dig into this naked class a little bit. A lot of people view these naked bikes as kind of like wheelie bikes and that kind of thing, and this bike can do that, but it's not something that's going to accidentally do that for you and that kind of thing. It is really the modern day sport bike. As you've watched the motorcycle industry change, you see less and less sport bikes or super sport bikes being sold, and more of these sort of standard bikes that are really quite sporty. And what it does is it gives you a comfortable riding position so you can use it as an everyday bike, but it also gives you a lot of sport components that make it very fun to ride, especially on the street, and if you want to take it to the track, you can do that as well. Now, this particular class, the MT-07, is that sort of 650 through 800 cc middle kind of ground kind of bike. Has a lot of good bikes in there. So it has a long time favorites like Kawasaki's 650s. It has Suzuki's challenged with their 8S and 8R. I've driven the 8R, which is essentially the same as this. On this, we did a riding impressions, I should say, on that, so you can compare that bike to this, and I really like that bike a lot. But this one is a little different. This one seems simple, and it seems easy to ride, and it kind of makes me wonder, for the young person looking at an MT-03, I think that makes some sense. But if you're mature driving, got some driving experience, mature rider, and you want to jump into motorcycling, just buy the MT-07. It is faster, it's fast enough, we're going to talk about some of that speed, but it is incredibly easy to ride, and that's one of the real strengths of this class. Is this middleweight kind of class has become very easy to ride while still giving you very good, enjoyable performance. So we're gonna start with the front wheel, look at some of the components, and talk about how those translate to being on the road. So taking a look at the front wheel of this bike, you've got components that really do enhance the ride. Now, one thing I did notice, if you look at what a lot of you will call chicken strips or safety margins, whatever you want to call it, this bike has been driven by a number of people, mostly not me. You can see that the tire wear is not really at all near the edge here. Now, you can blame the drivers and the riders for that, but I do notice that the rear tire is much closer to the edge. So the sizing is traditional sizing, but it's something about the geometry of this bike where the front wheel really doesn't lean over too far. I can tell you it's very confidence inspiring, and I will tell you that these tires, like a lot of the bike, are just a little bit better than what they've been in the past. So these are the Dunlop SportMax Q5A tires, which I quite like in this class. It's very competitive, they're very confidence inspiring, they're not by any means like absolute top of the line tires, but they're better than they used to be. A lot of time you'd see the cheaper Dunlop SportMax tires on here. So you've got a nice new version here. You get the dual disc brakes, which is what you get in this class, basically is standard for the class. It's a nice reason to move up to this class. You got the upside down forks, pretty standard for most of the class, although not all of the class. You've got the radial mount brakes, which again, more of that super sport type technology, that is stiffer type mount. It's also just for styling, let's be honest. And of course, Yamaha always puts some nice lightweight wheels in there. So I will say that turning in at speed or any other thing is very confidence inspiring. And that's a combination of decent tires that are good for confidence, as well as just the general geometry and the lightness of the feel of this bike. I will say the suspension is non-adjustable. That is pretty typical for much of the class, although not all of the class. It is a fairly firm suspension, so you really have that sport bike type setup, which is good for cornering. If you're looking for the ultimate in comfort, you could probably probably get softer shocks in other bikes. I will say though that in this class, you don't want to go too soft because that'll sacrifice some handling. So very good overall. Again, nothing that blows anything away, but just a little step up from what you would see in a lot of other bikes. Taking a look at the engine here, you see a lot of 650s to 700-ish cc's in this class. This one is the CP2 engine. That's the 2-cylinder engine from Yamaha. The CP3 is the 3-cylinder engine. So they look very similar sometimes at a very quick glance. But again, this one offers class competitive power. I think it delivers it a little better than some. So what I mean by that is a few different things. First of all, before we get to the engine, just show some weight things. You do have the exhaust that does all the hard work down low. That's where you get the emissions compliance. And then the shorty pipe right there, that's also keeping all the weight down low. It's probably cheaper to do than to run a separate muffler up here. That's probably why some other bikes do it, but it is something that this class does quite a bit, and it just is, again, keeps that weight centralized. So when we talk about the character of the engine, let me pull out for a second and we do that. So in the class, one of the most recent redesigns or recent engine additions to this class was from Suzuki, and I really enjoyed driving that Suzuki GSX-8R, which is the same as the 8S essentially, which would be the direct competitor to this. What I did find different in the Suzuki is that I seemed to not be in 5th or 6th gear all the time, whereas this one I was much more comfortable being higher up in the gears. And I'm not sure if that's just the way I was riding on the day that I did the riding impression review of the Suzuki compared to the way I was riding today, but what I will say is this engine is very good. It's the class that gives you one shift in that 0 to 60 mile per hour run, so you can go well above 100 kilometers an hour here in Canada in 2nd gear, and I say well above, like well above. So you end up with that single shift, and that's what a lot of these bikes have. Where that shift is in that 0 to 100 kilometer an hour, 0 to 60 mile per hour run can vary a little bit, but you're doing the single shift to get to, you know, highway legal speeds, 1st to 2nd gear, and you're there. But it's also a bike that's very comfortable to be driven in higher gears, even around town and country highways. So it's a very comfortably versatile engine. It definitely has a better sound with that 270-degree crank than something like the Kawasaki competitors to it. They are knocked for their lack of sound. Their sound doesn't bother me, but this sound is better. It's no question about that. So again, it's just about that little bit extra power, a little bit broader power band, the little bit better sound. And again, that's kind of what you get here. Everything's just a little bit better than average, and nothing really seems worse than average, except for one silly thing. That's my own personal opinion, which we'll get to in just one second. First of all, before we go too far, let's show you riding position of this bike. As we jump across here, one of the things I really like about this bike is the front end feels light to turn at almost any speed. So like I said, diving in quickly is easy. I drove the Duke 390, which is a naked style bike with obviously a much smaller engine, much lighter bike. This one doesn't feel that far off that bike. That's a really light bike. That's a whole lot of fun to drive. And you know, cornering around town and narrow, slow speed cornering is easy on that bike. So is high speed cornering. That's one of the things I found with this bike is the slow speed cornering is quite manageable. Now again, I don't want to tell beginner riders that this bike is easy to ride, but for anybody who's got a little bit of experience, this bike is easy to ride. It's, you know, it's easy around town, and it's one of those things where the chassis feels like it's really nimble even at those slower around town speeds, but then the engine makes up for it, and you've got all the power you need in the country highways and actual highways. So it's both nimble in town as well as nimble at highway speeds, and of course very capable, or you know, country highway speeds, and of course very capable of internet speeds. Wow, internet speeds. I mean interstate speeds for the Americans and major highway speeds here for the Canadians. So it's just one of those things that's very well balanced. Where it surprised me was that slow speed handling. It's just so easy to ride compared to other bikes and some other bikes in the class, but it maintains that easy to ride right up through where you're going to be riding this bike. Just again, a little bit above average kind of everywhere. But let's focus in on controls here. There's dash and controls. Some things I like, one thing I don't. All right, take a look at the dash here. Full glare, we've got the dash off. I just kind of want to show you, you are looking at the clouds for sure, but as we turn it on, hopefully you can see a little bit better what's going on. I don't know if I can get this at an angle where you can't see clouds today. Maybe we'll try this for a second. It is tough to see. This dash is not going to film very well for me in today's outdoor light, but that's okay. We've done a better review of this in the past. In the bottom here, you have any number of things that you can switch. There's odometer, fuel gauge, and instant fuel right now, but you could change that to average fuel economy. You could change it to trip odometers, all kinds of things. So we've done sort of a review of that in the past. Generally speaking, this is an easy to read dash. Again, you can't see it great today, so we're not going to focus too much on it. The tachometer comes up the side here and straight across there, works very well. The revving of this engine works well. Now, where I have a slight issue, there's both good and bad here, and I'll show you that right now. So let's start with the good. As you have various dashes that include more and more features, you end up with more complication, and that can be a problem. So good things, flip up here and you've got your high beams on, flip down there and you've got sort of, you know, flash to pass, that kind of thing. It doesn't latch into place, but it works just fine. You've got a light in the dash that tells you if they're on, that kind of thing. So you can't feel the position. You could give it a knock for that, where some you push into high beam and it's actually in there. So you can tell by feel if you're on high beam instead of looking at the dash or obviously looking ahead. But in the daytime, it's nice to have this by feel in the right spot, just because if it was flipped up more, you could realize, oh, my high beams are on, I don't want them on. But again, you can see it in the dash and this works fine. So I don't have an issue with the high beam switch. The simple selection here, joystick with the checkbox in the middle, so you press it in to select. A lot of bikes do a joystick like this. I would say in general, Yamaha's dashboard system, their software system is fairly easy to navigate with this, and you can use it while you're riding. And then again, this is the home switch or the back switch. So that all is fairly intuitive once you learn where it goes. Down here, you've got a horn and a hazard light. Don't know if you can see that on camera. What I don't love, and this is probably a me thing, is the signal switch. So if you just tap it a little bit light, there's a single like click, and if you push harder, there's a hard click. I thought they were self-canceling on corners, and if they are, maybe it's something in the menu system, but they didn't cancel for me. What I don't like is they take up a lot of space, and sometimes I, try to cancel my signal and I end up turning on the right side signal. So you have to turn on the signal and then tap it again to turn it off. And I find like you have to be a little careful with tapping it to turn it off. That's sort of the way I have it. I honestly think that buyers of this bike will get used to this very quickly. My issue is the typical reviewer thing. Something's new, so therefore I don't like it, right? That's what you see with a lot of things with reviewers. I think people will get used to it. The issue I have is this isn't the control that most people complained about. I think the simple signal switch was very easy to use before, and I think this is probably just as easy to use once you get used to it, but I don't know that it needed the innovation that it has. This is fine. A new owner, or when this is your only bike, you will absolutely get used to this. Someone like me who rides a lot of bikes, it is taking me a while, and I have to think about my signals, which I don't personally like. But again, if you own it, you'll get used to it. It is different. It probably works very well. It's certainly a larger button to hit, but it takes a little bit of time for me. As we're talking about controls, the clutch lever is not adjustable. We're gonna go over to the brake lever is adjustable. I do like that. One thing I do appreciate, to change your drive modes on this bike, you have sport, you have street, and you have a custom mode. And once that custom mode is set, it's just mode, mode, and mode. That's all you have to do. That is super simple. All you gotta do is release the throttle, hit the mode button, you're switching the mode. That's super, super simple. I like that, that works well. Kill switch, start switch right there. And like I mentioned, the brake lever here is reach adjustable, the clutch lever is not. And I did move that for myself today for the ride. So let's talk about who this bike is for, and let's just stay within the Yamaha lineup for a second. First of all, the R7 has moved to a super sport style riding position. For me, that's just not for me anymore. It's a little bit less comfortable, but it's absolutely feeling like the super sport style. It shares the engine with this, so really you're not having any power. It probably shares the gear ratios. I haven't looked into that at this point. But this one would be the more comfortable version, and really it's just as sporty for the average rider. But that seating position, that R7 type seating position, is definitely leaned over. So while the MT-07 competes with Suzuki's version of this, the Suzuki GSX 8S, the R7 is more super sport than Suzuki's 8R. That's one thing to know, and same thing with the Kawasaki lineup, right? So Kawasaki, Suzuki, they both make their sport bike and naked bike fairly similar in seating positions, where Yamaha has really varied it up. I kind of like that because it separates the two bikes and makes them different. It's not just styling, you are literally choosing a very different feeling bike. I rode the R7, liked the R7. I just personally am not in the mood for a really leaned over sport bike right now, this would give me all the sport I need. And for me, personally, at my age, stage, whatever we want to call it, this is good. Seats nice and wide, seating positions upright, so I like that. So between the R7 and the MT-07, they're actually different. And then there's MT-03. The MT-03 is often that entry-level bike that we recommend in this category. Now, I like the R3. I just always have. Once I started, I never used to like it until I rode it, and then I loved it. I don't think I would buy the MT-03 personally. If you like it, go for it. That's your thing. The R3 is still an upright-ish bike. I like the styling better. It feels like a little sport bike. You could take it to the track, that kind of thing. The MT-03 I find is a little too compact for me, given that this exists. If you have a little more money to spend from the MT-03, I recommend this, because one thing that really surprised me is this bike really is as easy to ride as the MT-03 when you consider going the same speeds, doing in-town around stuff. It is bigger, it is heavier, but there's some sort of magic about this bike that it makes it quite easy to ride. So if you have some maturity to handle the power on this bike, you don't need to buy the MT-03 to get into this. Now, if you're young, buy a small displacement bike, get used to it. If you're gonna drop it, that's the one you wanna drop over these bigger bikes. But I do think that it makes this the real sweet spot in the lineup in that. And then you look at the greater picture. Again, compared to the competition, there's nothing that's perfect out there at all, but I would say this is generally above average in just about every way. And not exceptionally above average, but certainly not below average. There are some things that I like Suzuki had that quick shifter on there. This one doesn't come as equipped like that. I didn't even check the options. The Suzuki felt a little more sport touring in that GSX 8R. I really meshed with that bike well. But this thing is just a whole lot of fun everywhere. The sound is good, the power is good, the rev range is good, the tires give you the grip you want, the feedback. The suspension's not adjustable, but it's firm and good, the sporty feel you want, but not so firm that it's like incredibly uncomfortable. Everything about this bike is just really good. And it's definitely something that should be on your list in any kind of sporting kind of bike that you're looking for in that mid-range, whether that's a sport bike or a naked bike. Because again, like I said, sometimes there is that sort of melding of those two bikes. Yamaha, be aware, is different. That R7 is giving you that different riding position than this. For me personally, it's definitely this over the R7, and that's a personal taste thing completely, because I like this upright, more upright seating position for me. And I don't think you sacrifice enough sport, or you sacrifice any sport, for the average rider, which is essentially what I am. So this is a really good bike. It's easy to recommend. It's generally above average. It's also generally affordable. And I mean, if you were to give designers the instruction to make me something that's affordable and just slightly above average everywhere, this is the bike that it would pump out. This is exactly what that is. It's not the best bike out there, and I think people know that, but for the price, it really does nothing wrong. It's kind of flawless and above average where you want it to be. So that is my riding impression of the 2025 Yamaha MT-07. Quite a good bike. Really hard to not recommend to a very wide variety of people if this style of riding works for you. So there you go. Thanks everybody for watching to the end. We have a whole lot more coming, so do me a favor, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do that. Lots of motorcycle stuff still coming up. 2026s have arrived, so we're starting to do them already. Got a whole lot more coming up on this channel. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.